insightful, educational talk about self-sacrifice.
Self-sacrifice. Why do we do it?
Why do we do it?
Somebody fed us a line of BS that it makes us beautiful. You weren't taught that when you were a kid?
No, I was just taught that you had to sacrifice for everybody else and everybody came first or you were going to hell. That good and sacrifice were synonymous. Never knew anything about beauty. I never saw a sacrificing woman that was really beautiful.
No, I didn't either. I remember picking up somewhere that a self-sacrificing woman was a more beautiful woman. I don't think it went externally, obviously, but in the belief that self-sacrifice makes you more beautiful in the eyes of God. You know, I mean, I even think about the word self-sacrifice. It literally means self-martyrdom. Sacrifice means death. Somehow this belief that women need to give themselves to death makes us better people.
I can't understand how that could make you better people. If you give because it's a greater good to the whole, it's one thing. But to give just because you think it's righteous, I'm talking about sacrifice,
right.
not sharing, not contributing, sacrificing yourself. That sounds like a very depressed, sad woman.
Yes, and how many women do you know who are self-sacrificing? They're very sad, depressed women.
That's not love.
Mm-mm.
That's pathetic.
Yeah, and what's interesting is how many women are on antidepressants as a result. It's one of the secret, unknown things that we don't talk about, but...
Have to pretend they're not happening?
Yeah. It's embarrassing to admit that you're on antidepressants, but a lot of women are, in order to deal with sacrificing themselves.
Why do they do it?
Well, in our case, it's because it was ingrained in us as children.
Yes, that's true.
You know, it was like, that's what you had to do. A woman had to sacrifice herself to death.
We didn't have a choice.
Yeah.
We were wicked if we didn't.
Oh, if you even had an opinion of your own, you could go to hell just for having an opinion.
Yeah, thou shalt not think. Rule number 1. Blind obedience. Is that kind of self-sacrifice that prevalent in our nation?
Yes. Yeah. I'm stunned. This woman, I heard this from a couple of years ago, was a woman who, regular society, lovely Christian woman who did a presentation at Toastmasters about the importance of self-sacrifice. And I was just blown away by this misunderstanding that being of service is vastly different from servitude.
Define the difference between self-sacrifice and healthy giving.
Self-sacrifice is when you give away bits and pieces of yourself until there is nothing left. But what happens is when you put absolutely everyone else above you as more important than you, and you put yourself in a position of being worth less than everyone else.
Oh, that's the way we mothers always were, where we came from.
And a lot of women now. It's because it's so ingrained in our greater consciousness that women have to put themselves at the very bottom and make everyone else a priority, that we end up giving ourselves literally to death, which is why you have so many women out there who are on antidepressants or who are binge drinking when nobody's around. In the 50s, it was all these women getting together and getting drunk because that's the only way they could deal with it. Well, now we have antidepressants. But it literally is from women putting themselves at the very lowest. Husband, kids, cat, dog, boss, everybody else is above them, and they put themselves the very lowest priorities, giving themselves literally to death.
That's a terrible sickness because it's so destructive.
Mm-hmm.
Depression is really at an all-time high. And this is one of the causes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Every relationship that we have in our life is an extension of the relationship that we have with ourselves. So if we have a very unloving relationship with ourselves and we give from that place of depletion and not really giving to ourselves first, then we have nothing to give to anyone else. So what happens with a lot of us is that For me personally, I put myself at the very bottom of the list until there was nothing left of me. Then we take out that frustration and that depletion out on the people that we love the very most. Not understanding that we need to put ourselves first. Not ego and I got to put myself first. It's more about saying, I understand that I can't give what I don't have. Therefore, I need to fill myself up first and then give from the overflow. So when you fill yourself up first and you give from the overflow, then you give out of service and you're not depleted from it. You're just continually to give the overflow, and the sense of joy that comes from giving is what helps maintain that fullness.
Well, you know, my mom suffered from depression and looked forward to death as a liberator to get her out of polygamy because it was the only way. She really looked forward to dying, and she really believed that she couldn't have anything nice because it would be evil. She couldn't do anything that was fun or nice because it would be evil. And she totally sacrificed, like collecting brown stamps and putting them in a book and turning them in for rewards like they did years ago. Mm-hmm. But that's what she did, with sacrifices for rewards in heaven. And she was functioning with depression and not even there for us. So where did the self-sacrifice get her?
Apparently she thinks it's going to earn her a greater reward in heaven. I mean, I remember believing that when I was a kid.
But I remember
the more you suffer in life, the greater your reward in heaven.
Exactly. That's what they taught us. And suffering was really cherished, especially suffering of women.
Yeah.
Women should suffer.
They wore it like a badge of honor, how much they suffered.
Right.
So you go through life being completely empty, completely depleted, and there's absolutely nothing of you. And we were expected to believe that that's what earned us a better place in heaven.
And that's what a good woman did.
And that's what a good woman did, was gave herself to death.
Right. And so a good woman, if she doesn't value herself, she can't value her life, so she can't function properly in her own life to really give. It's impossible. Mm-hmm. Mom couldn't. Mm-mm. And I don't ever recall Mom taking her depression and turning it negatively, but she wasn't there for us, and that was turning it negatively in a different way.
Right.
Not in abuse and words, but she wasn't there for us. She actually wasn't there. She was too depressed.
She just internalized everything.
Right.
Yeah, I think my mom did that too.
Yeah. Very, very sad. Just gave up. She had no opinion. She had no voice. She had no value except to die for everybody else, and maybe she'd get in heaven.
Yeah. And a lot of women today still do that to an extent. And I think they need to sacrifice their happiness for the happiness of others.
How can we teach them that their happiness must be real before they can give happiness to others?
Well, it really comes down to teaching women that they need to be the most important person in their life. And that sounds very selfish. And I think a part of it is teaching the difference between selfishness and self-centeredness, because we have this misperception that they're the same thing. Where selfishness is thinking about yourself at the expense of others. Self-centeredness is thinking about yourself, being centered within yourself. And then when you give, it's not at the expense of anyone else, not even yourself. So when you're really centered within yourself and you have a really loving relationship with yourself, then everything else is an extension of that relationship with yourself. So you must make yourself first.
So if you're giving for others and doing things for others, it can't really be received with joy if you do it without joy.
Right. Yeah.
So if you're
giving out of depletion or expectation, you're not really giving from joy.
So the gift is empty. Maybe even defeating.
Mm-hmm. Depleting.
Yes. Not helpful to those that get it either.
Mm-mm.
It's really hard to live with that kind of a martyr.
Yeah, and a lot of us do it. We beat ourselves up. You see it with women all the time who, might create this lavish party and then sit around and complain how nobody appreciates how hard she worked to create this party. How hard I slaved for days and nobody appreciates it. She set herself up for that.
So, yeah.
And that's kind of part of it. I volunteer at church all the time, and all they do is ask me to volunteer more. You set yourself up for that. So it really comes down to not having a loving relationship with yourself and a loving, respectful relationship, and knowing how to set boundaries, and really understanding the difference between self-sacrifice and self-honor. Because when you really love who you are and you understand that happiness stems from your happiness within yourself, you have the ability to say no. No, thank you, that doesn't honor my time. But instead we say yes to everything and then wonder why we're so unhappy.
That's really true. That's exactly what the martyr does. They let everything and everybody take all their time and energy and then sit down and weep because they have no time and no energy.
And it literally comes down to servitude. Yes, master. Yes, master. Whatever that master is, your husband, your church, your kids, your school, you're letting everybody else control your life.
So a martyr can't say no.
A martyr can't say no.
Because they won't be a good person. Whoa. That's really revealing.
And it's all about self-judgment, ultimately. Perception is that it's based on the perception and judgments of others. It really stems from judgments about what you have about yourself and your own worth. If you don't feel a great sense of self-worth, then you feel like you need to have that worth fed to you by other people. Therefore, you're going to sacrifice yourself because you want them to give you the kudos that you need.
So basically, you're doing it for their acceptance because you need to be valued.
Right. And in the process, you are even more devalued.
That's a profound statement. There's so many women that should hear that. They don't understand it. Yeah. I have seen that over and over.
Yeah, and you hear women say, well, I feel like everybody takes me for granted. Everybody takes advantage of me. Well, it's because you set yourself up for that. Stop saying yes.
They're really giving away pieces of themselves for acceptance. They're dying inside for acceptance.
Yeah, inside every human being is the desperation to be loved and to be accepted and to feel valued.
We have so little education in our everyday world in helping people find their value. We have so much negativity and so many teachings that take a person's self-esteem away, like sacrifice. You can't sacrifice your life to make somebody else happy. Somebody that loves you wouldn't want you to do that.
Right.
That's unreal. Somebody that cares about you doesn't want that. They want a real, happy, sharing person.
Yeah. If someone really genuinely loves you, they don't want you to be their servant.
No, they wouldn't even ask it.
Yeah. We have this misperception that we need to be constantly serving other people and not understanding the difference between service and servitude. When you are being of service, it comes from a full heart. When you're living in servitude, it comes from depletion. And we vastly need to understand the difference between the two.
You really need it badly.
Yeah.
When you're living in servitude, it comes from depletion. Profound statement. How many women out there listening are living in servitude? A lot.
Yeah.
And a lot of them truly believe, just like we did, the way we were taught, that that's what a good woman does. She overlooks anything and any injustices and any disrespect done to her and cries about it alone if she cries about it, or internalizes it and just keeps her mouth shut and sacrifices more. That is gradually killing a person. Because you say they give pieces of themselves until they're gone.
Right. And what it does is it manifests as disease.
What kind of diseases does it?
What's interesting, my understanding is that a lot of times it turns into breast cancer.
Oh, really? Breast cancer. Devaluing your womanhood.
From overgiving.
Wow. That's very interesting.
Yeah.
Any other diseases?
Well, I think just cancer in general. I think like 98% of our diseases are stress related. what higher stress is there than giving yourself to death and then holding it all inside? So, I mean, you may be someone who explodes in anger once in a while against the people that you love the most. It's a release.
Right.
And a lot of women don't have a release. When men are stressed out, they tend to have their sports, or they go running, or they have physical activities to help work that stress out. And a lot of women don't have that.
Or they have a cussing anger fit, which is acceptable for them and not for women.
Or we go home and have our little pity parties, or we don't have a stress release as much as men do. It shows up for them as heart attacks too, for men who overgive and overstress themselves. Stress is an interesting thing on women's bodies. It affects us very differently. It also causes body fat. Yeah, there was some research that was done recently about that.
I can see that because on Sister Wives show, Cody Brown, when he took his fourth wife, Robin, into their polygamous family, all three of his other wives got fat. Robin was evidently very fattening for that family.
Yes.
She didn't get fat, but all the other girls did.
The three other girls kind of all grew up together. They had always known polygamy. That was what their brand of normal was.
Right.
They married into that because it was part of their belief.
Right.
Of course, they conveniently never mentioned on their show, but they really believe they can't go to heaven without polygamy. But I think because they all got married at about the same time, they were kind of grew up together. We're bringing this fourth woman into it, who was a lot prettier than they are. She upset the dynamics.
Yes. And they all gained weight.
Yeah.
Because of the stress.
It upsets the cortisol level in a woman's body and creates body fat, belly fat.
So then, it isn't what the woman is eating that's causing the problem, it's what's eating her.
In a way, yes. I guess you could say that. That's funny. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
So we need to stop sacrificing ourselves. And I think we see this even more now that women have entered the workforce, and now they have twice as much of a load. So now family and all of that, plus trying to make a boss happy on top of that.
Right.
And trying to play the dynamics with all of these other people at work in this competitive environment. And competition is very unhealthy for women.
Women by nature are cooperative unless something is wrong.
Right.
Of course, now in polygamy, that's not true because they're competitive because they have to be. They get less and less and less of a husband every time he marries.
What's interesting with the dynamics of polygamy is that it keeps women small. Not physically, obviously, but creating that environment of competition doesn't allow women to thrive.
Yeah, I can see that.
The competition is more of a masculine thing, and so competition for men actually becomes a game for them. Well, competition pits women against each other. That's not their natural environment. Women are much more collaborative. And in an environment where they're constantly battling for the husband's attention, they can't ever truly be who they are as women to the extent that women have the ability to be, because they're always under guard. Well, for starters, their hearts are always on guard.
Right.
They can't have a loving relationship with themselves because there's not only their immediate family, but also this extended family they have to sacrifice themselves for. They actually have to sacrifice their happiness for that.
Yes, they do. Yes, they have to sacrifice their happiness because it's natural instinct for everyone to want to love and be loved by somebody that will be loyal to them and dedicated to them, and polygamous women are never going to get that.
Right. And if they happen to get a paycheck, they have to sacrifice that too.
Right.
If they're one of the few women that can actually go get a job, they have to turn over their paycheck.
Right.
Even. So they sacrifice everything for that kind of lifestyle.
Yes. Yeah. And so there's, since they don't believe in any form of birth control, there's all the sacrificing for all the children that are way beyond their means to take care of, and it just doesn't get any better.
Mm-hmm. So that's really an extreme version of that particular lifestyle that we both grew up with is really an extreme version of what self-sacrifice turns into.
Right.
And these are women who basically go through life completely numb. This is the only way you can survive, is just to shut your heart off completely.
What are the main guidelines that you would give to define the difference between self-sacrifice before it happens. In other words, coach us on how to stay out of self-sacrifice.
It really comes down to, again, being very conscious of your thoughts and very conscious of your choices. So if a lot of us were raised with a belief in self-sacrifice, we have this belief that self-sacrifice somehow makes us a better person, and we're living our life by default, we will continue with that pattern of self-sacrifice. It really comes down to being very conscious of our thoughts. And when we're asked to do something, to stop and ask ourselves, does this honor me? Does this honor my time? Is this respectful of me? Is this something that's going to help me be a better person? Is this something that is going to take away from something else that's more important? It's really being very consciously aware of the choice before we do it.
And then one should be aware, if they're not honoring themselves, they're not really helping the person they're sacrificing for, because they're not teaching them the right thing.
Correct.
Right.
So, I mean, even with, for example, teaching our kids how to clean up after themselves. How many women go around and just clean up after their kids and not ever teach their kids how to clean up after themselves? What is the message that we're teaching our kids?
You're not teaching them how to be self-sufficient. You're actually making them helpless.
Right. And you're giving them this false perception that women need to be self-sacrificing.
Yeah, moms are supposed to clean up, do all the maid service.
Mm-hmm. I tell my kids all the time, I'm not your housekeeper.
Your kids are lucky because they'll learn what real life's all about.
Mm-hmm.
Those that come with the housekeeper don't learn. Because when they're on their own, they're not going to be a housekeeper either unless they find somebody that's going to take them in and keep them for a pet.
Right.
And that makes it very hard on their relationships and everybody else's.
Right.
But that happens a lot.
Right. It does.
I don't think the average woman that's sacrificing realizes that she's damaging her child by not teaching them how to be self-sufficient.
Exactly. So a lot of people don't understand that as a parent, your role as a parent is to be a role model for your kids. So they're literally looking at you and you're modeling for them the behavior that they will someday be modeling in their own lives. So as a parent, if you're, again, conscious parenting, which is really understanding, what am I modeling for my children? What are the lessons that I am teaching my children when they watch me move through life? Because whether we realize it or not, every lesson they learn is a result of them watching us. And their own beliefs in their self-worth when they grow up are in a great deal stem from what they see us do and what we say to them as children, as their parents.
So if mom rewards a child for his bad behavior by doing everything for him, he's going to do whatever he gets rewarded for.
Mm-hmm.
And think that's normal.
Right. And then go out into the world and expect to be rewarded for his bad behavior as an adult. And not know self-responsibility.
And mom's sacrifice has been more harmful than helpful.
Right.
It hasn't helped anybody. It's hurt her. It's hurt the child by making him helpless or think that it's okay.
This is why we have kids who are 30 years old still living at home.
True. And it's why we have kids that think society owes them a living because they're alive. And I think that's part of the problem that perpetuates it into the next generation. Because women buy into that because they're told that that's what a good woman does. And they believe it.
Right. And so those men grow up expecting their wife to be self-sacrificing like their mom was.
Right. And
just continues to perpetuate that.
Yeah. And they seek a woman like their mother. You know, people really do seek a mate like their parent, wittingly or unwittingly, when they're young.
Right, or they completely consciously look for someone who is completely the opposite.
Well, if they're maturing correctly, they make better decisions than to just seek someone like their parent. But a lot of kids aren't maturing correctly. They're not thinking about that. They're just magnetically drawn to what they know and what is familiar.
Mm-hmm. Yep, completely subconsciously, yes.
Yeah. So if their familiar life in the past has been one receiving constantly, somebody waiting on them constantly, somebody meeting every need without them having any responsibility, they're going to look for that pattern.
Right.
In a relationship.
And so we as women need to change that.
We sure do. We have a big responsibility. I don't think that people will change till they really understand the dynamics, which is what makes the show very important.
Mm-hmm.
Because they need to understand the cause and effect. They're sacrificing because they believe it's good. There's nothing good about it. There's no good outcome.
Right. And you're really taken advantage of. Ultimately, it comes down to self-honor. We've been taught how to respect and honor everybody else except ourselves. It really comes down to making ourselves the priority in our lives, because we can't give what we don't have. If we don't have a loving relationship with ourselves, we can't genuinely give love to others, because everything we give is an extension of who we are. You know, a loving relationship with your children is an extension of the relationship you have with yourself. Your loving relationship with your spouse is an extension of the relationship you have with yourself. At work, every relationship you touch is an extension of the relationship that you have with yourself. So if you don't have a loving relationship with yourself and make yourself a priority, you can't possibly have fulfilling relationships outside of yourself.
It looks like it's caring, but it's depleting even for them. Mm-hmm. You know, the sad thing about it, a child can feel that when mom's too tired to really bother with them.
Mm-hmm.
When she's so exhausted that she just wishes she could go to her room and cry. A child can feel that. Now, what does that do to the kid's head?
They know they're not loved.
Either that, or they grow up thinking, well, that's what women are for. They should suffer like that. They're lesser human beings. And here we come back to the original statement. Less than.
Less than.
Being less than. Nobody's less than. It's a myth.
Right. So we need to stop holding ourselves in that position of less than.
It's terribly important. Nothing good comes from that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you can say, okay, I can sacrifice myself if it's going to save a nation, but you're saving nothing. This is not applicable to a heroic act. This
right,
is
right.
This
Are you willing to set yourself up as a self-martyr? Because literally that's what it is. It's a choice for martyrdom.
But it's a choice for martyrdom with no good outcome.
Right.
If you could martyr yourself and save the nation, save the world, save a war, but this is saving no one. It's destroying everybody. This is totally counterproductive.
Right.
It hurts everybody. It hurts the family. It hurts the children. It hurts everybody. Thank you for the words of wisdom. You're great.
Thank you. It was delightful to be here again.
Thank you. It's always great to have you here. You're a good teacher.
Thank you.
Good role model.